All right, so we are live. Hello, everyone, and welcome to our community conversation this month. Our community conversation this month is celebrating recovery, embracing hope. And this is in lieu of National Alcohol and Drug Addiction Recovery Month. That is September every year, and it has a lot of significance in basically changing the conversation around addiction. We all know the way that addiction is framed, the way that the conversation goes, really lacks empathy and humanity. So, the part of this webinar that we're hoping will really stick with a lot of individuals and that maybe people can relate to in Oklahoma is bringing back the empathy, centering the conversation and celebrating the resilience of individuals who are in recovery, who have gone through recovery, to promote an understanding and support for those who are affected by addiction, and so that we can begin to talk about the resources and explore the pathways to a healthier and happier life for many Oklahomans who might not know the avenues that they themselves could engage in for National Alcohol and Drug Addiction Recovery Month. So with that, I am Ashley Bender. I am the Interactive Marketing Manager for Oklahomans for Criminal Justice Reform, and I am joined by three of my amazing coworkers. If you guys would like to introduce yourselves.
I'm Michael Olson. I'm the Policy Counsel for Oklahomans for Criminal Justice Reform.
Hi, I'm Jennifer Williams. I'm Project Manager for Oklahomans for Criminal Justice Reform.
Hello, everyone. My name
Ryan, if you want to try turning your video off, that might help with your audio.
is Dukes, and I'm an ambassador with OCJR. Oh no, this internet is not.
That's okay. We can kind of get started as you get your internet situated. I'll do your brief introduction. So Ryan Mukes is one of our ambassadors, one of our formerly incarcerated individuals who helps us to basically make sure that the policies, the priorities, the data that we're putting out whenever we're doing things isn't just talking into a vacuum. We're actually utilizing the resources and the knowledge of people who have been in the carceral system and how it actually affects them. So that's Ryan. We have awesome ambassadors. You're back with us?
Yes. Hello, everyone. My name is Ryan Mukes, and I'm an ambassador with OCJR. Sorry for the bad connection.
That's all right. So we're going to start off talking about, I kind of touched on it a little bit, but I want us to kind of talk about from our different niches the significance of National Alcohol and Drug Addiction Recovery Month and why it's important to specifically celebrate and support recovery. So obviously I talk generally about framing the conversation. I really do think that's important as someone who works in the social media space. It is so easy for each one of us to fall into line of letting the negativity of a narrative overpower the empathy and humanity behind the individuals we're often talking about. So that's my take, but I'd love to hear everyone's opinion on why it's important to center in recovery and resilience this month.
Yeah, most definitely.
Go ahead, Ryan. Okay, well, coming from my background, just having people that I'm related to struggle with substance abuse disorder, and really watching the stigma surrounding that, and then fast forward into my career where I worked in substance abuse treatment with the Department of Corrections, and watching people be punished for their addictions. I believe it's important that we highlight that this truly is an addiction, a medical condition, and we should be treating it as such. And so I think that this month gives us the chance to really highlight that we need to focus on getting people the treatment and the help they need versus punishment for those addictions.
Yeah, most definitely, Jennifer. I'm glad you said that, because one of the first things that comes to mind for me is that a lot of people I know that have been incarcerated have used drugs to numb the generational trauma and things they've been through, which have led them to be incarcerated in some way or another. And I don't think a lot of people see themselves headed that way, when they start using the substance. And then I'll also bounce off of what Ashley said about the narrative. You know, being addicted is a disease, and I don't think a lot of people look at it that way. They just look at it as a choice. No one chooses to have a disease. We don't start these things realizing that they're gonna overtake our our brain chemistry and start to attach themselves to our body to that becomes a disease. I don't think a lot of people think about that and how the support and help you need has to come from every area of your life to overcome that disease.
Yeah, and for me, I come from a legal background. I was looking at this from a criminal legal perspective, but you can't be involved in criminal law without touching addiction. 65% of state inmates across the country were either on a drug when they committed their crime or have an active substance abuse disorder. So that's more than half of everyone in prisons nationwide. So this is something that you run into if you're in this field. And also, just as everyone said, I want to reiterate that this is a disease and not, it's a chronic disease, though, much like other diseases like asthma, for example. So addiction has a relapse rate of around 40 to 60%, depending on the individual. But asthma has a relapse rate right around there at 50 to 70%. So it's important that this is framed as what it is, which is a public health crisis.
Yeah, I think that's so crucial. And I think that as we see, so many things are politicized lately. And I hope that in this conversation, we can take away a lot of the political nature of the conversation and get it down to the bare facts of whether it be the data or whether it just be what all of us have said, that these are human beings, that this is an extremely common problem, unfortunately, all of the nature of this conversation. And I'd like to give a nod to Oklahomans who were able to see in 2016 that this is an issue. When we talk about this conversation, when we talk about addiction, we can't not touch on State Question 780 and State Question 781. Oklahomans decided that they didn't want to just lock up individuals who were having crises, who were having run-ins with a disease. They decided that criminalizing an individual instead of getting them treatment was not palatable. And since then, State Question 780 and 781 have become more palatable to Oklahomans. It becomes more and more apparent that Oklahomans are ready to support their community members. And I think that this is an apt conversation that we have to have as we see things like State Question 780, 781 begin to possibly begin to actually be implemented and the funds finally getting into these the places that they should be. And that's all a little bit vague because I'm going to pass that question over to Mike. If you can give us just a quick rundown of what State Questions 780 and 781 were and what their intended outcome is.
Yeah, if you don't mind, before I answer that, I'm going to give a little bit of context surrounding like the time period they were passed and all of that. So as we know, that crime is like a huge public policy problem, not just in Oklahoma, but like literally everywhere across the globe. It affects citizens who are more likely to be a victim of crime when crime rates are higher, and it also affects economies. There was a study conducted by the University of Chicago that found that the United States loses over $4 trillion, that's with a T, annually to the cost of crime, and that's an absurdly high number. So in the face of this public policy problem, states across the country have tried to combat crime in different ways. With varying results and using varying methods. In Oklahoma, that's manifested in what people call the tough on crime approach, which uses long sentences and overwhelming criminal justice contact to lower crime. But after decades of using these methods, it hasn't really worked. Oklahoma is not more safe. Oklahoma has nearly doubled the average sentence length of Kansas, but Oklahoma has a higher crime rate in almost every category compared to Kansas. Oklahoma has a 15% higher violent crime rate, 38% higher property crime rate, and a 95% higher burglary rate. So something's not working with how we were addressing crime. And the people, as you Ashley mentioned, in the face of all these public policy failings, kind of took matters into their own hands and passed State Question 780 and 781, which were closely related ballot initiatives that were approved in 2016. State Question 780 reclassified low-level drug crimes, drug possession crimes, and some other low-level property crimes into misdemeanors instead of felonies. And then its related ballot measure, State Question 781, directed that the savings to the state from the reduction in incarceration and other related savings from this reclassification procedure to be put into a fund to be used by counties to provide substance abuse treatment and mental health services. And for multiple years, the legislature didn't utilize the fund as intended, in direct contravention of the will of the Oklahoma people, until this very last session in 2023, when the State Question 781 fund got an appropriation in the amount of like $12.5 million. So now counties are going to be able to utilize these funds to battle this public health crisis of addiction. So sorry, that was kind of a long-winded way to say that State Question 780 and 781 were like an attempt by the Oklahoma people to reverse course a bit on the war on drugs and begin to treat this addiction crisis not as a personal failing of the individual, but instead of as a societal failure in the face of a public health crisis.
Yeah, Mike, I like that you said that. And statistically, I can't really put a number on this, but when I think about it, I know that we all have some type of addiction. What I've learned to do is turn my negative and bad addictions into positive ones, like running, living a more healthier lifestyle. So I think when you say that, it makes me understand that Oklahomans are starting to realize that we're all human beings and we all may have some addictions in some way or another, if they're not bad and they hold us back and, stop us from, prevent us from going forward in life. So with that's a huge piece. The 780, 781 is one of the things that surely helped instill some faith in humanity for me. So that's huge.
And Oklahoma has never been more primed to invest in mental health and invest in substance use treatment options. We know just lately we got access to 988, which has been wildly successful here in Oklahoma. It is a shorter version of the suicide hotline, and they have been very forthcoming in their data of how successful it truly has been. And the point of 988, and part of the success of that, is that it doesn't have to be an actual moment of attempt. It could be that you have ideation. It could be that you just need someone to talk to. And that goes to this conversation we're having about not having the stigmatization of suicide, that anyone could have ideation, anyone could have depression, and anyone could need to just utilize a service one time and move on. And having that sort of support system in Oklahoma is crucial and has been very successful. And my coworkers have heard this so many times. I can never get over this quote that comes up about the war on drugs. And maybe it's my age that comes through, but when Mike talked about the war on drugs, there was a quote from John Ehrlichman, who was assistant to the president for domestic affairs under Nixon. And he says, and I quote, "You want to know what this war on drugs is really about? The Nixon campaign in 1968 and the Nixon White House after that had two enemies, the anti-war left and Black people. You understand what I'm saying? We knew we couldn't make it illegal to be either against the war or Black, but by getting the public to associate the hippies with marijuana and Blacks with heroin, and then criminalizing both heavily, we could disrupt those communities, we could arrest their leaders, raid their homes, break up their meetings, and vilify them night after night on the evening news. Did we know we were lying about the drugs? Of course we did." And I have read that time and time again. It's all over all of our social media, period, like all of our platforms everywhere. And it goes to the intentionality of the narrative, which I think is so important. This is an intentional description that having an addiction is your fault, that it is your community's fault, that it's a nature of who you are and where you live and what you surround yourself with. And I think that it's really important that we look at the falsehoods in that and that we say it for what it is, that it was intentional and that it was successful. It was a very successful campaign that went on for quite a while, and it was a global campaign. And there are many nations that are still reeling with the legislative as well as the social impacts of that campaign, and Oklahoma is no different. While we're making great steps such as 780 and 781, we still have that narrative ingrained in so much of our legislation and the way that our society is created. Which kind of slides me to our next question of how we know the legislative steps, and we'll get more into some of the kind of state agencies and statewide programs that are there for addiction treatment and resources. But I'd like for us to start first with how can community support and engagement play a vital role in the recovery process? First, I want us to briefly touch on that community aspect. We work a lot in the community. We have obviously a coalition that works in this space. So how does that community aspect really matter when we're talking about recovery?
For me, the first thing I want to say, because you touched on this, is it would help everyone in everyone's community to heal and move forward if we can realize just what you said, that there's a lot of people in different communities that vote and vote for certain people because they make promises to suppress other folks. So those things still exist today. They think because it was made way back then that the system still doesn't carry a lot of these burdens, but they truly do. Like it just perpetuates the problem time and time again. And for me, the way that the community can help us all move forward is by just keep having this conversation and realizing that we're all human beings and that we're all going to make mistakes. I know y'all heard me say this all the time, and I can't stress enough, but if everyone just put an emphasis on that, think about the times that you made a bad mistake and you wanted people to give you just and due diligence for you to move forward in your life. And realize, like we said, we all have addictions, even if it's a positive one. We it's not our jobs to pass judgment on our peers. It should be our jobs to help them elevate and uplift themselves. And I just think if we keep having that conversation in every community and started coming together and realizing that we all have stuff in common. We all have childhood traumas. We all have things that as adults that we don't like to do or don't want to do that we have to do. And the only way that we can move forward as a community is by coming together and having these conversations and figuring out what we have in common to move forward as a community. Because the way I look at it is I'm only as strong as the weakest link on my team. You know what I mean? And it's not to mean that it's a weak link. It means that maybe I don't quite understand the way they go about things. So let's keep that, in mind when we're passing judgment down to someone we think needs to be judged. You know what I mean? Because they probably don't. They probably need support more than they need judgment.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with you, Ryan. I think addiction is universal and it doesn't discriminate against anyone. Addiction can be found anywhere. And each subset of our society has a way of shunning it and stigmatizing it. And so I think the way the community can really work towards helping people and hopefully preventing further addiction is by not having a stigma on it, taking that away, making treatment and rehab and all of the services that we have readily available, and it to be normalized that if you need help, that you get help. And talking, to your children about if there's addiction in your family, these are things that you need to look out for. These are things that you need to prepare yourself for because we know that this runs in our family. Things like that we can lessen the stigma and just make it more of a conversation that people have, just like as Michael said, if you had asthma or anything else, instead of it being this burden on people.
Yeah, and as everyone's been hinting at, this is like really psychological problem, mental health issue. So we can't imprison our way out of a mental health issue. A mental health problem requires a mental health solution. And that's the key part that I think the community aspect provides, at least much greater than any incarceration setting could. For example, the Pew Charitable Trust did a study that showed that state drug imprisonment rates had absolutely zero effect on self-reported drug use, drug overdose deaths, and drug arrests. So really, there's no relationship between drug imprisonment rates and drug use. So imprisoning people isn't solving this problem.
Right. And that it really thought of, Jennifer, when you were talking about the familial aspect, the generational aspect of it. There's data that came out a few years ago on the federal level that shows that residents in most of the panhandles, such as Cimarron County, Texas County, Beaver counties, all of those individuals have a higher rate of possible abuse due to the fact that those counties are some of the only counties in the state that do not have drug courts. And that means even just having a drug court proximate is going to make that conversation more proximate as well. When we're talking about how communities look at this issue, Tulsa community is going to look at this issue different than a Cimarron is because of the resources, the help that we have, and it allows that conversation to flow more freely because it's top of mind for a lot of people. And when we go to our rural counties, what we're seeing is so many of our rural counties do not have resources at all. I'm not saying sparse, I'm saying zero, nothing at all. And it is hours and miles upon miles for them to access those things. If they can do that, the program is probably full. Because as we've seen, additionally, as we kind of start to pivot towards drug courts, one of the most successful drug courts in Oklahoma is Oklahoma County Drug Court. Judge Stoner, as so many know, is an incredible individual who really works on what it means to have a robust system to come back to. When he works in his drug court, he's not just saying, okay, do XYZ requirements, pay me the money to do that because drug court is very expensive, and then go away. What he's doing and why he has such a success rate is that he's making sure that these individuals are truly wraparound services provided for, and that's really important. There are 59 drug courts in Oklahoma across the state. So out of our 77 counties, you can see that that means that there are counties that are not having access to these sort of resources. And just off the cuff, drug court is an alternative for individuals who struggle with substance abuse and have been charged with a nonviolent felony, though there is discretion, judicial discretion between counties. So that means that some of our counties, very few, but a few of our counties do serve juveniles, whereas most do not. And it really does look at like the sanctions truly are different to every single courtroom, which again is not ideal. We don't want people to not know whether they can access treatment, not know even what is available to them, as well as it's narrowing the pool of individuals who can be helped. And Oklahoma County has said many times they don't have enough space. They have space for 400 individuals, and they habitually are letting us know that the need is so much greater. There's additionally other sort of alternative courts, such as Veterans Court, which is supposed to be tailored to not only the potential substance use issues or mental health concerns that come with that population, but even more so, there are supposed to be tailored responses to treat these individuals for the robust system that has been created that perpetuates certain crimes and certain illnesses and diseases on certain people. So I can kind of leave it open if anyone else has anything to say about drug courts, alternative courts, and we can kind of begin to go into the actual state engagement of resources that people can use for recovery.
Yeah, I would just like to throw in real quick that I have most definitely, when I first heard about drug courts and was introduced to them, I wasn't quite sure about how they work. But I can say one thing about Oklahoma County Drug Court that I know of for sure. I never personally went through drug court, but I know a few people who have went through drug court and have now are living prosperous lives, having careers. And it was a lot, and it was due to a lot of the resources that they got through the drug court. So I can most definitely second on that with my lived experiences and the people that I've dealt with, that is a better alternative, surely a way better alternative than to keep incarcerating people and filling up our prison systems, because once we talked about it, it's not getting us anywhere. So that alternative in this treatment, right? That's like Michael said, that's what we need. If the people who are having these problems when you go and get locked up in prison, it just creates more it creates more drug habits and more problems for you to go deeper into your problem. So the drug court, and we surely need more programs like drug court, and and it should most definitely be in every county, because everyone needs access to treatment and stuff like that, for sure.
And I'll third that from a more policy angle. Research shows that addiction treatment is cheaper than incarceration, and it leads to better outcomes, right? The average cost of incarceration in Oklahoma is 3 times the cost of treatment. So every person you send to prison instead of incarceration, that's 3 times more tax money that we're spending on that. The treatment benefits also reduce crime. There's a study that showed that each additional facility within a county reduces the cost of crime in that county by $4.2 million on average. So you just put a treatment facility in a county, and that's $4.2 million on average saved. It also has opportunities for families to break out of these generational cycles of criminal legal contact, and for the police to focus on more important crimes rather than acting as a mental health responder, generally without the proper training. It also saves money in the sense that if 10% of eligible prisoners were diverted to community-based treatment programs, that would end up saving create $4.8 billion in new tax revenue. So there's just a lot of monetary benefits beyond the huge human impact that we've been talking about, but there's a lot of monetary benefits to treatment courts as well.
Yeah, and just to further what Michael's saying, just anecdotally, just observing the drug courts, I've had the opportunity to go to Oklahoma County and Tulsa County and observe what occurs. And it's not like any other courtroom we've ever seen. Each individual is treated as an individual, and their needs are being met by several different people on a team. The judges are much more encouraging and have connections with their participants. And so I think that has a huge impact on people moving forward, knowing that people are investing in them, knowing that people care about their success and are fighting for them to succeed. It just changes the whole outlook of a person. And so I think that's an invaluable thing that maybe we can't get metrics on, but just changing people's lives and seeing the outcome and the success. It's really moving to watch. If you ever get to go to a graduation, it's really neat.
And one more thing I'd like to add, hearing Jennifer and hearing both of y'all, that's key for recovery, is a support system, a support group. A lot of people, I know me personally, when I wanted to come out of my problems and my addictions, that I was looking for support, people who really believed in me and would help me elevate. And, once I found a pretty good support group, it surely helped me get there, and then it continuously helps me build and add to my life. So that's so key. Without support, recovery is almost impossible without the correct support. So that's so key.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. We've seen recidivism is such a robust issue, and this is just one small piece of what we're talking about here is recidivism rates. People who reoffend, they're going back to the carceral system after spending a period of time in the carceral system. The recidivism rates for individuals who are going through drug court is incredible, and we know that other states do drug court different than us. There are a lot of states that will allow felony charges and still allow an individual to go through drug court, whereas in Oklahoma that's not available. And just for felony rearrest rates, they decreased 40% before going on to the misdemeanor in New Jersey, which is with this report is from New Jersey. The misdemeanor was over 58% of a reduction in recidivism rates. And it just goes to show so much of this recidivism, so much of this cycle that we're talking about really can be broken by just allowing someone to have the choice. I think that's also an important aspect to talk about in the human nature of you're allowing someone to invest in themselves and you're not necessarily forcing it. Something that Judge Stoner talks a lot about when it comes to drug court is you've got to want it. It is an expensive process, so you have to want it in that aspect. You have to be willing to work monetarily to be able to pay for all of the drug tests, all of the requirements, all of the things that you have to do through the program. But you also mentally have to really want it. So for people who might be on the fence thinking that drug court is an option that allows people the easy road, which even if we were, is that so bad to allow people an easy road sometimes? But it's not. It's truly allowing someone the choice to invest in themselves, invest in their future, invest in their children's future. We know in Oklahoma the ACEs scores, or adverse childhood experiences, is astronomical. It far, far exceeds national averages. And what that means is that children in our communities are having a touch point with some form of trauma that's staying with them. Whether that be having a loved one who's incarcerated, that is a trauma that is staying with children. And when we increase incarceration, we increase ACEs scores. And when you have an increased ACE score, you yourself are more likely to not only be in the carceral system, but also to continue generational trauma. And when we talk about this, so much of it truly is investing in the future of Oklahoma. Investing in reform is investing in our community members, in your neighbor who's a mother or a father or a child, and investing in breaking the cycle that we already started. Something that I also just want to say as we talk about this is we've already started the cycle. We already started generational trauma. We already started the implications of the war on drugs. And so as Mike said, we know that that's not working. So what do we do to begin to create a better Oklahoma? And I really do think that that's important. I say all that in a moment of hope as we look towards the pitfalls. I do think it's important as we have this conversation that we look at not only the effectiveness of this, but the pitfalls. And what comes to mind for me would be having the conversation about the fact that our drug courts don't allow individuals with felonies. The fact that we don't have drug courts in all counties. We don't have enough resources for all of the people who need these resources. But I'd like to see kind of as a whole, if we know of pitfalls that we need to be prepared for when we have this conversation, that we're not just advocating blindly for reform, not knowing the both sides of the conversation.
The biggest issue that I see is that we need consistency across the state. We've touched on it a little bit. Right now, they're each being run individually, and I would like to see a little bit more consistency so that people know what to expect. I think that that is useful for anyone going into a program to know what to expect, and it should be kind of standardized across the state. That makes sure that everyone isn't getting the same services, everyone is getting the same opportunities, and everyone is being held to the same standard. Aside from that, I mean, I just think the consistency is such a big issue. But you know, everyone wants to run their program individually based on the needs of their specific area too. So I can see both sides.
Yeah, and coming off the heels of when you say that, Ashley, there are more programs that if you take the initiative, if you really want to change and you want some difference, you know, you need support. There are a lot of different nonprofits and agencies out there supporting people who have been criminally justice involved or just trying to change their lives. I would encourage anyone listening that needs help to hit that Google bar and just talk to it. That'll give you plenty of resources. If the state is not doing the work, there's someone in the community willing to help you move forward. And all you have to do is reach out and let them know that you need help. It's not easy because we have to swallow our pride and our ego to do that. But there are more systems and more things put in place besides the drug court that'll help you. I'm a product of one of them myself. And that's exactly how I found them, is by hitting the Google bar, is why I said that. And without a place like the Virgin Hub, without nonprofit, with nonprofits like OCJR, those are the type of things in your community that will help you overcome your problems. So it's not just drug court that we can look at to facilitate growth too. There's other nonprofits and programs put in place in just about every community. And if not, there's be one real close to you that you can get to. And I would just encourage anyone who's struggling or with addiction or just needs help in general to reach out and look for these organizations and ask someone, because there's a lot of us that are willing to help. We just don't know you need to help until you let us know.
For me, the biggest problem I see is just access, especially in rural areas. The state of Oklahoma supplies around $150,000 per treatment court, which is not a lot of money to run an entire court program. As Ashley said, 4 counties don't have access to treatment courts at all. But it's not just a treatment court problem. 2.1% of the population lives in the most rural counties in our nation, but those same counties only have 0.9% of all health professionals. So there's just a deficit of psychologists, of other mental health professionals, and other doctors of all sorts in these rural areas. And that can really cause a strain in these areas, because there are studies that show that rural individuals actually are more vulnerable to mental health disorders than people living in urban areas. The gap in suicide rates between urban and rural has grown since 1999, and rural suicides are almost double those of metropolitan areas in our country today. So if there's an area of our state that really needs mental health treatment and they're not getting it, and I think that is a big issue that we're facing in Oklahoma.
Right. It goes back to that conversation you're having about who is targeted and who is dealing with this in our community. We know our rural community members are dealing with a lot of these issues at higher rates. We know that our Black community members are dealing with a lot of this at a higher rate. Additionally, young individuals are dealing with both of these issues at a higher rate, being mental health and substance abuse disorders. I think the last study that I saw that was done by HHS was around 15% of young adults who are between 18 and 25 had both a substance use disorder and a mental illness the year prior, which would have been 2022. And the numbers are around 1 in 3 or 1 in 4 adults had either a substance use disorder or mental illness in the past year. And 46% of young adults who are, again, 18 to 25 had either substance use disorder or mental illness. And so it's important for us to look at who is being affected and try to make a more tailored approach. I think that's really what I see as the main pitfall, is that since these programs are so sparse, they can't really truly serve specific communities. Additionally, we know that this past legislative session, our LGBTQIA plus community was targeted greatly, which we can assume will have effects again on the young population of Oklahoma. And we don't know what kind of mental health concerns could come from legislation such as that. There's not enough robust data, unfortunately, even in states that have already passed this sort of similar legislation. But we can reasonably assume that it will impact the youth of our community. And so if we can build systems that are more robust, we can begin to help them. But right now, like everyone has said, they're not funded properly. They're just missing in some areas, and they're not tailored enough with enough resources for them to be able to look deeply into case by case, to even consider allowing individuals with a felony to come to their program when they can't even have everyone who has a misdemeanor but qualifies coming through their doors. But
Just to put a button on that, sorry, real quick. What's important is that in these rural areas, a lot of people assume that it's that they don't want to seek the help that they need, but that's not true. There was one study that showed that rural counties with women who perceive that they have a need for treatment, 90% of them had lower odds of receiving treatment in a rural county compared to an urban county. So it's not that they aren't seeking treatment, it's that these people are seeking treatment, but they just can't get it. And I think that's an important distinction.
And something else that it makes me think about when you guys say that is that all of it goes hand in hand. If you live in a rural area, you have some mental issues, and the only thing you can do, or you feel like you can do, to help you with your mental issues is suppress them by using a substance. And so just listening to you guys say that, it just makes me think how that's, that's the same thing in my community, even here in the city. It's just like you're painted in a corner. You don't really have the resources you need to get the help. So all you can really do is mask your mental ability, the mental problems you're having with the substance, and it just creates another vicious cycle in your life that keeps you trapped in the system.
Right. Just under 65% of people in the nation can't access mental health treatment. And we know that, as we're talking about, that's just going to worsen and worsen when you go to areas that have less and less resources, less and less funding. And that is the premise behind State Question 781 as well. State Question 781 was never meant to be a blanket response. When we talk about not wanting these just blanket things, it's supposed to go to the county, and the county decides, this is what I see, this is what I need in my community. That can't happen if we're not having these conversations. All of the legislators at the Capitol, all of every single level of politician in Oklahoma needs to be willing to have these conversations to hear what their community members need. But that is the point. State Question 781 is supposed to go to the county. The county can decide, you know what, I do need a treatment center, or I do need this, or whatever it is that the county needs should be up to them so that they can serve their community members. And that's integral to what 780 and 781 was supposed to do. I'd like for us briefly to touch on, as many of them are in our coalition and our partners. Ryan, you can go first once I finish this question. To just touch on some successful peer support programs and just some nonprofits that we work in this space with, and kind of give them their shout out for the incredible work that they are doing. But I'd like to hold space for them in a second. And Jen, I'll probably pass that to you after Ryan, of allowing us to talk about the success of what programs in Oklahoma County and Tulsa County and abroad are doing. But it's important that we're not just saying in these moments that we don't appreciate the work that's being done. We do so much appreciate the people who are working in this space. We just want their lives to be easier, is all.
And yeah, I was just going to touch on the point of, I just had a brain lapse. I'm sorry.
That's okay. We can circle back.
My brain went blank.
Well, the first thing I can recommend for anyone seeking treatment, needing help, and I gave it to every person I ever had discharged from our prisons, was findtreatment.gov. It's a great website. You put your zip code in, you can find for substance abuse, mental health, or co-occurring. It's a very, very useful site. And that will lead you to a lot of our partners. Diversion Hub, as we've mentioned, has a great program. They're doing amazing work. They have a great diversion program. Women in Recovery team. There's so many good places, but they're also in these big cities like Tulsa and Oklahoma City, like we're talking about. And they are doing great work, but they're overwhelmed. And that's why we need to invest more money. That's why we need to invest in these rural areas so these people aren't having to travel. Because as we know, when people are having a crisis, driving 3 or 4 hours isn't useful or helpful or anything else. You need help right then. And your local emergency room may not be equipped or knowledgeable to deal with whatever you're dealing with in that moment. So it's definitely something that we need to address.
I'm so glad you said that, because that brought back to mind what I was about to say. And the point for me is being able to get people to realize that we vote the people who make the law. We put them into office. So the more we start to come together and have a conversation about what we want as the people, we also need to put an emphasis on the people we're putting in the office. Because if we put the right people in the lawmakers in office, then the work should be being done already. And all we should be able to do is come along and help them do the work. But we have to, as a community, and the people in the community, really put an emphasis on the people we're putting to make these laws. Because if If we put the right people in place, like I said, the work will become easier for all of us. And that's our job as a community, is to put those people, but a lot of people don't realize that. So we have to get off our butts and stop thinking our votes don't matter in certain communities. And if we all went out and voted, maybe we can find out if our votes really meant something. Because I know my vote means something. But I need more people that look like me in my community to understand the only way we're ever going to get anything to happen for us and to make any change is to get out and go vote. Talk to the people who are running for office, pick their brains, see where they're really at, how they really feel about the issues that mean most to you. And maybe that's the only way we'll make a significant change, you know? And so I just want to put an emphasis on that, because there's a large void of people who don't go vote, but will complain about the things that's happening. I was taught, don't complain about the stuff that's happening to you if you're not willing to do anything to change it. And the easiest thing that you can do to change what's in front of you is by going to vote for the people you think that will make the change. It's just that simple. And I just wanted to add that in there, because we can talk about this all day. We can educate the people on the work we're doing and the work that needs to be done. But if they're not getting out to go vote so we can get the people in place to make these things happen, is we're going to be at a standstill, or we're only going to get a little bit of movement at a time. So I just wanted to say that.
In case you were wondering, the next time you can vote would be October 10th. That's going to be the election date for special elections, propositions only. And then we don't have much voting left this year. November 14th would be the next special election candidates and propositions. And then December 12th is our final special elections and propositions. So that only affects certain counties. I would strongly recommend everyone go to oklahoma.gov at the bare minimum, but you can go and basically look up any state election board. Their websites are fantastic, very easy to navigate, very informative. And I think though, even just those elections are usually the ones that are kind of swept under the rug, because nobody takes the time to really look into those. But I know that District 39 actually has a special election coming up in December. So anyone who's watching this who's in District 39, and if you don't know your district, again, you can go to oklahoma.gov and figure it out. But that really is such an important part of it. It's important to know not just who is putting legislation in your name, because it is in your name. It's in the name of the people. It's in the name of Oklahomans. So it's good to know who is doing that, but it's also good to know that you're electing someone who is true to their word, that you're not always electing someone just based on what they might be telling you on the campaign trail. It is good additionally to look at the policies of what someone has done, to look at the past of politicians, to let you know, okay, no, this is a hard line for me. Set your boundaries like you would with any relationship that you have. This is my hard line. I cannot find support in someone who does not support this. That's really important. And it's what I learned in college. And I think it's really good to get my generation motivated, is that find your hard lines and then just find a candidate that supports that and that won't step on what they said they might do in that, but we won't go too deep into that. The last thing I want to do before I move to closing thoughts is ask anyone on here if they have personal story or someone in the community they know of who has a great moment of recovery or hope that inspired you. I know that when I started, I was in college whenever State Question 780 and 781 was being passed, and I came back, to be honest, not knowing what had happened. But when I worked in this space, got into this, I looked through our own social media, Oklahomans for Criminal Justice Reforms, and we had posted all of these really inspiring videos ahead of the mass commutation. And I would really strongly recommend that people go watch them. Most of them are women, most of them are mothers, and they're sitting there telling you, like, I had 15 years for this drug possession, and I just deemed that I would never get to see my child walk down the aisle. I would never see my child graduate from college, high school, whatever it is. And they're telling you all of these missed moments, and you can see how that would affect your mental health of everyone involved. And it also just was so inspiring to watch the light come back to everyone proximate to that, to the individual who's getting to come back to society, to the children, to the families. And it's alleviating a social burden that we've talked about, but we didn't go deeply into. 1 in 3 families in Oklahoma goes into debt supporting their loved one who's in prison. That the consequences of prison are not just centric to those who are inside the facility. They really are so robust. And I think that was what clicked so many dots for me. I really, really do. They're very short videos. They're like a minute each. And they go through the lives of women who have been able to come back into the community. And I think I would say that that's one of the most hopeful moments of recovery that I've seen. Almost every single individual had a low-level drug offense, and they were in for 10, 15, 20 years, basically giving up their lives for something that was a disease. So that's something for me that allowed me and still allows me to work in this space that can be a little heavy.
And
Yeah,
for
so
me, sorry, Ryan, I keep stepping on you. For me, like I said, I work for the Department of Corrections, and I was started off providing SAT, and then eventually became program manager over several programs throughout the state. And I got the pleasure of attending all of the graduations, and it was such an honor to be a part of that, to watch people graduate those programs, and have a new hope, and have the opportunity now to go up for parole, or to have their sentence commuted, or even to go home if they were balance suspended, which is an amazing thing, to go home that same day as you graduate. But now, working in this space, I've had the opportunity on a few occasions to run into people who were actually in my programs, who are now working in this space and advocating for change and working with people. And that is truly inspiring, to watch people who were in a struggle position whenever they entered the prison system, and thankfully got the treatment that they needed and were able to turn their lives around, and now are out making a difference and impacting the same people, that was one of them when, before they went into the prison. So I think it's so powerful and important to be able to recognize that these are human beings and they're going through a hard time, and that they have so much to offer society, and we can't just discount them and throw them away in a prison.
and that's the perfect piggyback for me to hop in. For me, I am a product of everything that we're talking about. From day one, I was born to parents who were in the military, who got addicted to the drugs while they were in the military and overseas. Then in turn came back, created a void in my life because they couldn't raise me the way that they needed to, being addicted to drugs. So therefore, created a void in my life, made me angry, created resentment because I was raised by my grandparents, not realizing then how much of a blessing that would be for me today. But yeah, so it's just that for me, I realized that it was up to me to break the vicious cycle of my family. And if I wanted to keep my kids from being incarcerated, that I had to change my way of living, thinking, even breathing, eating, and sleeping, because that was the only way I was going to break that generational curse. And it's a work every day. Every step I make, every move I make, every thought I make is to make sure that I'm doing the proper thing so that my children do not have to go through anything remotely close to what I've been through. And by all the graces of anything I've ever learned and have the power of understanding that's happening, my children are doing really well in school. My youngest boy is testing way off the charts, So for me, I'm just a product of it, and just being in the system and being able to understand what it was doing to me empowered me enough to want to change my circumstance and my situation. And I'm still taking the steps to do that every day. It's a battle. I have things that come up every day that haunt me from 15 years ago. So, but where I'm at today and where I stand today, being able to do this work and to give back, it's all for a reason. Everything I survived, everything I lived through was for me to be here to help other people so they do not have to go through as much as I went through. And I want to thank each and every one of my coworkers on here today, because just seeing you guys motivate and inspire me, and inspire me. Y'all don't have to be doing this work. Y'all went and got degrees to do this work, and I can only take my hats off to you for that. But it's people like you guys that continues to instill faith in humanity for me, and I can't thank you enough for it.
To piggyback on that, it's the exact same feeling, but opposite directed at Ryan. and all our ambassadors and really anyone that I've ever encountered, including when I worked in a drug court. It's overcoming addiction is extremely, extremely difficult. It's not an easy task. So to see anyone that's done it is truly an inspiration. It takes on average 5 attempts for someone to overcome their addiction. So to see individuals across my life that have done that, each and every one of them is an inspiration, because that's a very difficult thing to overcome.
Yeah, I'm glad that you brought up our ambassadors. I wanted to say, of course, we are thankful to all of our ambassadors that we have right now. We additionally are very thankful to our previous class of ambassadors. I don't want you to think that OCGR just forgets you when you're gone. We're so thankful for the stories and the time that you shared with us, for Derwin and Gina, all of you. So much of what you taught us, we carry with us as we continue to work for OCJR, but additionally, just your willingness to speak allows us to do the same for our current cohort of ambassadors and all that we hope to work with. Our hope is that as we continue to have new ambassadors, as we continue to learn from formerly incarcerated individuals, we can better tailor ourselves to be advocates, because one of the most important parts of being advocates, and it'll go into my closing thoughts, is that each one of us is an advocate for something, whether we mean to be or not. The stances that you take in your life are a portion of being an advocate for something. And that can be unfortunate if you don't want to think about the politicized nature of so many things. But I think a great way that so many of us can be an advocate is to listen. I think Mike and I have talked a lot on our podcast and here, and Jennifer as well, about one of the most important things that we do is just listen. We listen to people who are impacted. We listen to the data. We just don't talk sometimes. And that's important, which is funny as we're sitting here talking at everyone. But it's important that we as advocates learn, and sometimes we need to relearn something that we thought we knew. So many people think they know what addiction is. So many people think they know what it means to have a mental illness or to have substance use disorder, but we don't always actually know what that is. And I think it's really important to listen to the people who are impacted, to listen to the data. A lot of what we're saying here is just a one-stop shop to allow people to further their own education, to allow you to invest in your community and find out, is that happening in my community? I always say, we both say, Mike and I on the podcast again, that we want people to fact check us. We want us to go into the community and say, that's not exactly what's happening in my community. It's actually this. It's a different brand. It's a different font of it. And that's crucial to the work that all of us do. It's crucial to our communities becoming true communities, to have the investment, not only monetarily, but the social capital as well, is very important. So my closing remarks would be to fact check all of us, to go test if what we said is actually happening in Oklahoma. And the only way you can do that is to engage in your community and to begin to learn about your neighbor, learn about what your community members are facing, and learn about if they have treatment options, if they have tried to access them, what kind of barriers they have. And it'll lead to better voters, it'll lead to a better community, and it'll lead to a better future for all of our children who are growing up in a space that is truly centered around healing and hope and recovery. And that's why we ended in this space, is because this is meant to change the narrative. The work we do, along with all of our peer support recovery programs, is meant to change the narrative, to let people know they're not alone, to let people know that they are people, they deserve empathy, they deserve support, and that the community wants them. The bottom line is that every single year, 100,000 Oklahomans return to your community. So wouldn't you want them to be supported and healthy and happy? That's what we want. That's the policies that we push for. So that's my long-winded, overarching closing thoughts, if anyone has closing thoughts as well.
Yeah, I just want to say ditto that. Like, I that was brilliant. Like, the only thing that I would add to that, and this is from my point of view, is that I know there's a lot of people in the community doing the work without being recognized, and I appreciate you for that. I know it gets frustrating when we're trying to help people grow and help them advocate, and they quite don't understand what we're trying to do because they're stuck in their situations. So I just want them to know that the work you're doing is making a difference, even if it doesn't feel like it is. It really is. We have to continue to plant seeds, and we have to know that we're doing the right thing. And the final thing I want to say If you can't reach them by speaking to them, or what you're verbally saying is not touching them, just continue to lead by example.
Yeah, just to echo off what Ashley was saying, at the 95% of all state inmates get released eventually. So like we talk about how complicated this issue is, but really you can look at it in a very simple way. With 95 of them getting released, it becomes important to think about what sort of people we want our neighbors to be, what sort of people we want our family to be, what sort of people we want in our communities. Are they getting they're getting released. So the question is, do I want that person in recovery and have all the tools at their disposal to combat this affliction? Or do we want an individual that has zero tools, likely very little resources, and still has an untreated mental health or substance abuse disorder? It's really just ultimately about giving every single Oklahoman a chance to succeed.
And I'd probably say the exact same thing that the two gentlemen said. Just, you have to remember you're dealing with human beings, and we're all human beings. We all want to be treated with dignity and respect. And if we're facing a challenge, whatever that challenge is, we want to know that we have a place to go and feel supported. So like Michael said, people are coming out of prisons. They're going to be your neighbors. I can promise you, I've run into several of my guys in public and in my neighborhood, in my area. So they're coming back to your community, and you do want them to have the tools and the ability to deal with whatever they need to deal with, so that they can be better neighbors, they can be a better parts of our community, they can participate fully without having to deal with the affliction.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I think that while it's a conversation for another time, it goes to that notion of truly understanding what public safety is. I think this will allow some people to look at what public safety means. If you had a reaction or you felt some sort of way hearing that so many individuals are coming back to your community, I think it lends us to think deeply about why that would affect some people, why you might balk at the thought of so many people coming back to our community, and also to realize the implications of how many people we must be incarcerating if that many people are coming back to society, because those are staggering numbers as well. So with all of that, I'd like to say thank you to everyone for being here with us. Thank you for sharing your insights and your thoughts. And thank you to everyone for watching. We'll have another community conversation next week. And please check out our social media pages as well.